welcome to another episode of TV on TV, right here on Brookline Interactive Group. As you know, we're in election season, and that means TV on TV runs a bit differently. We don't have any news segment. We go right to interview because we want to interview the candidates in competitive races and give as much time as possible to that interview. You know, we've got a competitive select board race, we've got a competitive school committee race, and we have a competitive library trustee race, as well as competitive town meeting races in most precincts. The election is on Tuesday, May 6th. Polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. There is opportunity for early voting in person and by mail. I will let you use a search engine and look up that information from the Brookline Town Clerk's website and be really attentive of those details because the dates and times are different seemingly for every day of election season. We're in the midst of our interviews with school committee candidates, and today I have Bob Weintraub, candidate for school committee. Bob, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Tommy.
Now, I should mention, for school committee, there are 3 positions, which means folks get 3 votes. It's a 9-member school committee. 3 are up this year. There are 2 incumbents, 4 challengers, and you're a challenger. You won in for the first time. But before we talk about that, Bob, tell us what you've been doing your whole life. Tell us about yourself.
Oh my. Most people know me because I've been in Brookline for a really long time, and I love Brookline. But let me go back to my first professional position, which was back in the day. I was a community organizer in Birmingham, Alabama. I worked closely with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, actually dating myself, hung out with people like Hosea Williams and Ralph Abernathy. I hung out doing some organizing planning at the home of Sally Davis in South Birmingham. Sally is the mom of Angela Davis. So those, that was a long time ago. We did voter registration work in Birmingham and around Birmingham, and that got me very much interested in politics, especially politics around civil rights. And I'm very proud of the work I did there. One of the things that I also did in Birmingham was I was an English major in college, and I was invited to teach an English course at Miles College in Birmingham. Miles College is a historically Black college, and I just loved going to work at Miles and walk over to the campus, and we talked about great books. I said, how amazing is that? And so that ignited my interest in actually teaching as a career. So I spent a few years down there, had some interesting experiences, including some Klansmen breaking into my house and burning all my books on my lawn. In fact, I always have one of those. This book was the bottom of the ashes. So I just want to demonstrate that I did some courageous work down in Birmingham. Then I joined the New Jersey Urban Education Corps up in Jersey, taught New Jersey, taught New York City, moved up to Massachusetts, worked in an alternative, sort of chaired an alternative program in Arlington High School for kids who were struggling in the high school. Then I went up to Lowell, Massachusetts, the Lowell Public Schools, and I taught English up there. And then the superintendent called me down to his office one day, Pat Mogan, amazing visionary guy, and said, we're opening 2 new magnet schools in Lowell, essential ingredients in our voluntary desegregation plan in the system. And I'd like you to consider becoming the principal of one of those magnet schools, a K-8 school. And Pat said something really interesting. He said, because I said, K-8, I'm kind of a high school guy, Pat. He said, you'll be fine as a principal because you don't have to know everything about the curriculum and instruction and the age group. You have to know how to get along well with people, and you can do that. I was flattered by that, and I actually became the principal of this incredibly exciting school. It's called the City Micro Society School in Lowell, and together the faculty and I created something very, very unique and very special. We were recognized nationally. CBS News, Roger Mudd showed up at our school because he heard about the kind of work we were doing with the kids in Lowell. And we were ranked as one of the top 50 elementary schools in the country. I loved going up there every day. And then one day I got an opportunity to interview in Brookline. And I live in Brookline, I've lived in Brookline. And so ultimately I ended up as the principal of the Runkle School for 1 year. And then I was the assistant head of Brookline High. And then I was the head of Brookline High for 19 years. It was like the signature component of my professional life. And I can talk a lot about Brookline High School. I retired from Brookline High School when I got a flattering call from Columbia University provost, who said, "We've heard about you, and we have a position, professor of the practice in educational leadership at Columbia Teachers College." And that was a struggle for me to decide to leave Brookline, but I decided to do that. I stayed there for 3 years. I love New York City. I'm from Queens in New York City. But I didn't love the culture of Columbia University. And so I was recruited by Boston University, and for the last 14 years, I think, 214, no, for the last 11 years, I've been a professor at Boston University, which became Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. And I'm pretty proud of some of the work I did there, including the creation of a doctoral program focusing on educational practitioners. And I'm also very proud of the fact that we were successful in recruiting over 50% of our students were students of color. The current vice principal of the Lawrence School, Dominique Ferdinand, got her doctorate in our program. Mindy Paolo, who's the head of English language learning in Brookline, was part of that program as well. And now we're in our third cohort. And I'm about to retire officially from Boston University, and I have a few extra hours, and I have some concerns about what's been going on in the Brookline Public Schools. So I'm running for school committee.
Yeah, so that tees it up, right? The second question is, you've spent so much time in the Brookline Public Schools already and getting paid for it. What prompts you to give more time to the Brookline Public Schools for free?
Wait a minute.
Yeah, it's
There's
an unpaid gig.
there's no salary in the school committee?
Sadly, no.
Are you kidding me? Oh, I have to reconsider. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I know that. Um, I'm sorry. What was your question,
So,
Tom?
so, so, like, why run? Why put all of this into it?
Oh,
You could be, sitting on the porch drinking a margarita.
yeah, I can do that too. But as I said, I have some concerns about what's been happening in Brookline over the last decade or so. Um, Let me go back to when I was here. For example, I was here for 19 years, well, 22 years at the high school, and all of my colleagues at the elementary schools and Vicki Milstein at the Early Childhood Center, we all came to Brookline because Brookline was an extraordinarily prestigious place to be, and people came here and stayed. And so Tom Cavanaugh stayed at the Baker School for 25 years. Marty Sleeper was at the Runkle School for probably 20 years. Carol Schraft was at the Driscoll School for about 25 years. Barbara Shea was at the Lincoln School for about 15 years. Jim Smith was at the Lawrence School. I can go on and, Jerry Kaplan was at Devo. And John Dempsey was at Devo. What I'm saying is that over those many, many years, and Jim Walsh was a superintendent, then Bill Lupini was a superintendent, people came to Brookline and stayed here. And there was a real sense of pride in being in the Brookline Public Schools. We consider, not, well, it was known as a lighthouse district. And as a result of having people come here and stay here, the principals, for example, really became a family. Every other week, they would come to the high school in my office, and we would support each other, talk about problems that we were having, and try to help each other. So the principals became a real family. And we actually still maintain that family long after we have left Brookline. And what happens when you have people who come and stay is you can build and build and build an organization. You build credibility in the community. Um, and because the reputation and the trust in the community is developed like that, um, lots of amazing people want to come here and work. Back in those days, if you had an English department opening at the high school, for example, you get 75 applicants. If you had a principal opening, which back then we didn't have too many, you get like 90 applicants who want to be a principal in Brookline. And so that element of the Brookline Public Schools has diminished. And it's a tremendous concern of mine. There's been a revolving door, particularly at the central office and also at the schoolhouse. And what happens is when you have people coming and going, new agendas, happen every few years. And there just isn't that organic development of an organization and of a family. And so that's a huge concern of mine. And I hope to have my voice among 8 other school committee members to address that and to think hard about why there has been instability in leadership in the system. And I want to make that lighthouse light much more bright, more like it used to be. So I want to work hard at that. I want Brookline to be an incredibly attractive place. When I first became headmaster, a few years after I became headmaster of the high school, I was invited to represent Brookline High School at a national conference of excellent schools at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. So there were 17 other schools there. Really some of the great schools in the country, Bronx High School of Science, Stuyvesant, schools all over the country. And I was flattered to, wear the identification of Brookline High School, and people look at my identification and say, whoa, Brookline High School. It was, for many, many, many years, it was an incredibly respected school, and Brookline Public Schools, under the long leadership of Bob Sperber and later Jim Walsh, it still was an incredibly respected public school system. And I love the public schools. My kids both went to the Driscoll School. They went to the high school while I was the head of the school. I told them, try not to get in trouble. I'll try not to get in trouble, and kind of worked its way out. They're doing great. My son is a teacher at Newton South for many, many years. My daughter's a school nurse in Arlington. My daughter-in-law is a special ed teacher in Cambridge. So, this is my family have a history of public service. You probably have heard me say that my sister, Ellen Weintraub, was the chair of the Federal Elections Commission and was recently fired by Donald Trump. So I am deeply committed to public service and public servants, and that's who I am.
So I want to get into a question that certainly school parents and others in the community have been talking about a lot lately. Superintendent proposed the budget for the coming fiscal year, and its cost was $8 million more than the expected amount of money the town would be able to put into the public schools of Brookline in the coming year, this $8 million budget gap. And that's really sort of been all throughout the news. And I think it's going to play a significant role in this election. So it's not an $8 million budget gap anymore. It's been reduced, but there's this ongoing, costs are growing at faster than 2.5%. Revenue is generally limited to 2.5%. And so help us think through the budget, not just for this year, but for the coming several years. It's a 3-year term on the school committee. What are your thoughts on how to manage these budget expectations?
Yeah, that's one of the really fundamental questions that we have to address. I think to begin a conversation about the budget, I must say that because of the instability in the Office of Finance and Administration in Brookline, I think that contributes, to, problem in the management of our budget. When people come, people go, people come, people go. When I talk about budget, I spent 19 years as the head of the high school managing a budget of over $30 million every year, around that. And I want to go back to a time when we had a budget crisis quite a while ago. Actually, in the mid 1990s it was, but it's a demonstration of how I see budget crises. And so we had about a $500 million, $500,000 problem at Brookline High School. And $500,000 back in those days actually was real money. And so I met with my team, I worked with Jim Walsh, and we decided to get into some good trouble. I kind of like getting into good trouble. I've done that my whole professional life. We decided to transform the administrative structure of the high school. We sort of stepped out of the box and said, let's take a look at the administrative structure, because I always want to protect class size and protect teachers. So what we did, and presented to the school committee, I've been before the school committee many times. We always counted the votes before we got to the school committee, so we knew what the result was going to be. We presented a proposal to dismantle the house administrative structure, which had 4 housemasters, 4 house teachers, and 4 secretaries. It was expensive, and we transformed it into a dean's administrative structure with 2 deans and 1, because the budget was, crazy tight, with 1 associate dean. I retained James Cradle, who was a house teacher, as the 1 associate dean because he was incredibly valuable to the school system. And then you had 2 secretaries. With that transformation, we saved about $500,000. Simultaneously, I wanted to do some other stuff at that time, and I required every administrator in the school to teach at least 1 class, including me. So I was excited, actually. I became an English teacher at Brookline High, and I taught points of view for many years till I left. We saved another $200,000 by requiring administrators to teach, because when I took an English class, it saved a 0.25 salary, because I wasn't getting paid for that English job. I was just getting paid for my administrative job. So we saved about $700,000. And then we were able to actually hire an additional social worker, because I felt that we needed additional social emotional support for some of the kids, for a considerable number of kids. And I also created the Opportunity for Change program, which I kind of modeled after the work I did in Arlington at an alternative school I worked in there. So that was my response to a major budget crisis, to transform the administrative structure. I did not lay off 1 teacher. And the savings that we made back from that decision carried over till today. I think they added a few associate deans, and they actually have an additional dean, but we still are saving hundreds of thousands of dollars each year from that transformation of the administrative structure. So fast forward to what we have now, as I think you know, and I think others know, my professional life in schools has been devoted to maintaining reasonable class size and to insisting that improvement and change be organic at the schoolhouse. I believe that when you invest in the schoolhouse, where the teachers come in every day and the principal comes in every day and the social workers and counselors come in every day, and by the way, the custodians and cafeteria workers and secretaries come in every day, you have a family there that is taking care of the children. And there has been significant growth at the central office since I've left. I think there's about 11 new positions there, and I think to the tune of maybe close to $2 million. And, I understand an organization has to run, but when you always have fiscal constraints, you have to really think hard about the return on the investment. And so I've been an advocate for cutting back on central office so that we don't have to cut back on teachers. The return on investment with teachers and with programming at the school, that if you look at data, you will find, I'll give you a couple of examples. If you look at the data that...
Don't give me too many examples.
Well, I'll give you one
I have
example.
time. Give me one.
I'll give you one example. I walked around Brookline High. That was what I did. I walked around, visited classes, visited offices. And, at a certain point, it sort of struck me that when I was looking at high-level math classes, AP classes, honors classes, there were almost no kids of color in those classes. Came back to my administrative team, including Adrian Mims, who was a dean. And I said, all right, this has been going on for a while. We have to address this. Adrian was in his PhD program at BC at the time, doing research on honors geometry for kids of color in our country. And it turned out what he learned was that throughout the country, when kids of color enrolled in honors geometry in high school, their teachers were not supportive enough. And they said, well, maybe you're not honors material, and they push them down to more standard level of classwork, of courses. And that was unacceptable to all of us. And so we created the Calculus Project, which began at the end of seventh grade, providing pre-teaching of the next course they took in the next school year. We did that for 5 years, leading up to the kids taking calculus in the senior year of our high school. In the first cohort, we had 21 kids. Every one of them obviously graduated from high school. 17 of them completed calculus. 17 of them took the AP calculus exam, and I think 14 of them got 3 or above. Now, this is data. That was absolutely extraordinary data for those days. We went from not having kids of color in the high-level math classes to having a critical mass of kids of color in those calculus projects and high-level honors classes. And so the lesson that wasn't a new lesson for me, but it's an important lesson that when the people in the schools who see the kids every day and know them, know what's going on in the organization, when they see problems, they can solve problems if they're creative and innovative. And I pride myself on the fact that over my entire long career in the public schools, I liked problems, and I liked solving problems, and I liked innovation and change. Calculus Project is one important example. And going back to the budget, invest in the schoolhouse. They make the difference. If you invest in the Calculus Project or the African American Latino Scholars Program or the tutorial program in a place like Brookline High School, you get an incredible return on your investment, and the data is powerful. I don't want to denigrate central office, but I have to say that the return on investment from folks who work in the central office is negligible. That's just reality. And so when you have tough budget issues, I always support the schoolhouse.
So we've only got 3 or 4 minutes left, and a couple of different things came out that I want to sort of see if you can, in just a few minutes, get your arms around. Educational equity, central office, getting things done at the classroom level, innovation. These things all sort of tie together, and they've been in the news. What should we expect from you as a school committee member? And I would add leadership turnover, right? What can you do as a school committee member to kind of get your arms around these things and chart a path
Right.
that gets the town to where it wants to be?
Okay,
in 4
great.
minutes or less.
So I think the main responsibility of school committee is to hire, supervise, and evaluate the superintendent of schools. In my professional life, I've supervised and evaluated hundreds and hundreds of people, administrators, teachers, counselors, social workers, blah, blah, blah. So I intend to be an active supervisor of the superintendent. And what that means is just interact with the superintendent frequently, maybe daily, and deal with what's going on in the school system. And I think supervision is help. Evaluation is judgment. Supervision is help. And again, I believe in saying to people, how can I help you? What do you need? And so I think an important role that I'll have, along with the 8 other members of the school committee, is to seriously take that responsibility of supervising the superintendent of schools. I think that's where it starts. And you've heard some of my views about the way I think schools should be and school systems should be. And I would work closely with the superintendent, along with my colleagues to define what is really going on in the system and what are the problems, and try to solve those problems with the superintendent. That would be, a key component of my role on the school committee. Is that enough?
That's
why I want to be in the school committee. I want to be in the room where it happens. That happens to be the James Walsh School Committee room on the 5th floor. I I love the community. I love the schools. I want to help right now. I mean, I have a lot of experiences. Nobody's got my resume. You know, I've worked pre-K 8, I've worked 9 through 12, I've worked higher education, all for significant amounts of time, and I am proud of my accomplishments in each of those arenas. I bring that to the table. I think I'm a unique candidate in that sense. I know a lot, and
And,
so
and I
yeah.
want to talk about that for just a second because we don't have much time left. It's an election. You're a candidate, right? And so it's not just about being fit for the job. It's about convincing the public that you're fit for the job, at least the voting public. Do you have a website?
Yes, I do.
Tell me what
Dr.
it is.
Dr. Bob for Brookline.com.
That's
Dr. Bob,
BRBOB
Dr.
for
Bob for,
Brookline.
right, the number four for Brookline.com. It's a dynamic website. It keeps changing. We got a lot of endorsements. We have some of my core beliefs on there. I'm very one of the endorsements that I'm very proud of is Janae Utaro. Um, and Janae Utaro was the director of the Office of Educational Equity. She also worked very closely with me at Brookline High School. She knows me, she knows my work, and I am very proud to say that she endorses me for the school committee. So yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're off to a bang. And folks, as you know, Tuesday, May 6th is election day. Polls are open 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. You can vote early. There are competitive select board, school committee, and library trustee races. For school committee, you get up to 3 votes for 6 candidates. And I hope that if you are able to vote, you do so. If you are not able to vote, I hope you participate in the campaign of one or more candidates in some other way, knocking on doors, helping to raise money, talking to your neighbors, getting other people to vote. Democracy works when we all participate. Dr. Bob, I want to thank you for coming on the show. That's Bob Weintraub. Folks, you've watched another episode of TV on TV with me, Representative Tommy Vitolo, right here on Brookline Interactive Group. Of course, the episodes are available online at brooklineinteractive.org and will be on the air just about every Tuesday and Thursday. I think it's Tuesday. Maybe it's Monday and Thursday. We'll be on the air twice a week between now and Election Day because we've got to get through so many great candidates in time for folks to make up their minds. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time. And folks, Dr. Bob Weintraub, candidate for school committee.
Thank you, Tommy. Appreciate you.